Hi, this is Brendan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock blog, and I'm doing a late night discussion. I also have a very bad cold, as you might be able to tell, for which I apologize. But I wanted to do something a little bit surreal tonight because obviously I'm not feeling great. It's late at night. I'm not totally coherent, and I want to pass some time because I'm having trouble sleeping. So I thought that I would talk about the Strange Tales New England, but I want to focus on topics that are sort of pertinent to my mood. So I guess the first thing I want to discuss is sort of the origin of the idea for Strange Tales New England. It really was. I mean, there were a number of things that brought it about, but one of the main things was me trying to find a way in a game to deal with some thoughts I had about an experience after my surgeries that happened, I think around 2011 or so. I'm not great with timelines on my health record, but I think it was around that time, and I I came out of surgery, and it was a very this is a very great simplification because the surgeries occurred over the course of about a year and a half, maybe even 2 years. But the final surgeries were more intensive, and I think they used heavier drugs. I think there was a lot more after effect, just in terms of like sometimes when you come out of surgery, you've been cut open. Do you know what I mean? So it affects you mentally, and so I had. I mean, there were a number of strange things. I was having hallucinations, which I think were a product of some of the medication. Like I was seeing little green men dance on my chest at night, and then when I looked over, I realized the little green men were the same color as the light on my air conditioner. But I also started to really not know if I had survived the surgery or not. And I was afraid to ask people if I was in the afterlife because I was worried they were going to tell me I was. And that made me, and that was like it was a very long period. It was like, I mean, over 6 months. It was over 6 months of time. It was because I was going in and out, in and out, and the last surgeries were over a period of months. And so I started thinking about movies like Carnival of Souls, Jacob's Ladder, things like that. I also started thinking about stuff like The Exorcist, and I didn't really think much of it until years later. Then we made Sartorius, we made Wandering Heroes of Ogregate, and I kept going back in my mind to that period, and I kept wanting to sort of, because I kind of operate like not like the games are not about biographical stuff, but I draw on life when I'm working on things, and so I I forget where it started, but I think I wanted to make an Exorcist game of some kind. Like I've always been a fan of The Exorcist, and I reread the novel, and then I read Legion, and then we, on the podcast you can see we were covering William Peter Blatty a lot. I was reading The Ninth Configuration and watching the movie The Ninth Configuration, and I think The Ninth Configuration was the film where everything kind of crystallized because I found that as sort of the place where these two ideas started to meet, where you have sort of a game that's largely based around exorcisms and ghost hunts and that sort of thing set in New England, but you also have this sort of surreal madness layer to it and spiritual layer to it that's different. And again, movies like Jacob's Ladder, stuff like that, In the Mouth of Madness, just things where reality can kind of bend and twist. And so again, when the book comes out, people will see what I'm talking about. It's a continuation of the Strange Tales of Song Ling concept, but it's brought into New England, and I wanted to do that because again, I live in New England, but also, I live right by Salem, and this is basically Arkham. It's basically Lovecraft's Arkham. He positioned it, I think, a little bit higher on the coast. I had to look it up, but I'm pretty sure it's a little higher on the coast where he positioned it. But basically, Salem, Danvers, Peabody, Beverly. That's all kind of like Arkham, I think. And especially if you like this, if you read H.P. Lovecraft, you can kind of start to visit these places. He came and visited this area a number of times, I guess, and so like if you go to like Marblehead, that's Kingsport, that's or Kingsport, that's the town where the festival takes place, for example, and that's just one town over from Salem. For those who don't know, Salem is a town north of Boston. It's about, I don't know, I want to say like 20 minutes north of Boston. I'm not 100% sure. I don't go into Boston that much. And it's if you go up that coast to like the area where he supposedly would have positioned it, you get more into like you get more into like Wenham and what is it, Manchester by the Sea. Just as a side point, if anybody's seen Manchester by the Sea, the movie, Manchester by the Sea is a rich town, so it's not a working class town. I haven't seen the movie, so I could be wrong, but my impression from the trailers is it's sort of presented as a working class seaside town, but it's really like if you have money, you live in Manchester by the Sea. I don't know. I wanted to do something set in New England that draws a bit on Lovecraft, but I'm not super into the Cthulhu mythos aspect of Lovecraft. I'm into his other materials generally, and so I mean I like the Cthulhu mythos too, but I'm drawing more inspiration from his other materials, and yeah. So the way that madness comes into the game though is and again if you're going to play in the game, this is a spoiler, but it's an interesting concept that I kind of like, which is as I said, Salem is Arkham, and Arkham Asylum is Danvers State Mental Hospital. For those who don't know, Danvers used to be Salem Village. So if you have Salem here, and you can't see what my hand's doing, but my hand is moving to the right, and to the left of that you have Danvers, and Danvers changed its name after the witch trials, I think basically to get away from the history, and so Danvers State Mental Hospital really would have been located in what was once Salem Village, and it's in a kind of remote area of Danvers too. I went and visited it, and it's like out in the boonies. Danvers is pretty big, but I don't think of Danvers as wilderness. But when you go to and Danvers State Mental Hospital is no longer a mental hospital. It's been turned into apartments, but the architecture is still there, and they have like a presentation or like a memorial thing that kind of explains some of the history, but it's very much you feel like you have to watch out for bears when you go there. You know what I mean? You're just kind of that close to the woods, it seems, and so. There's a chance for every character that's in the setting that they're an inmate in that asylum and they don't know it. And that's where a lot of the reality bending comes in, because it gets very surreal once you commit to this idea of a player being an inmate in the asylum, and whether they have escaped and don't realize it, or they're just somehow projecting themselves. It gets very psychological and stuff. But the key is making that random. I think if the GM just picks somebody and just says this is going to be, that cheapens it a little bit. I didn't want it to feel kind of like in the 90s we had a lot of adventures like that. I wanted to have some of that element, but not in the way it was done in the 90s. And so there's a random chance that somebody is an inmate in the asylum. And the exact chance is listed in the book. And so it turned out to be a cool mechanic. We had an adventure where the players were investigating a murder, and one of the players, as he was investigating it, was having these flashbacks, and it became very clear that he was himself a murderer. And uh, and when they went to sort of the trail led to Danvers Asylum or Arkham Asylum. It's Danvers State Mental Hospital in the game, but Arkham Asylum. Uh, you know, he basically encounters himself in the cell. So it was kind of an interesting adventure. Um, and I don't know, the game is about that. It's also about the weight of sin and the corruption of the soul. And so, the characters all have sort of like they don't all have, but they can have sin. This, if you take points in sin, you get more skill points, and these are sins that they have to contend with in the game. And also, the game is a very popular term that I don't really like, but it's a very sort of liminal border type game where you're not really sure where you are. Are you in life? Are you in death? What's going on? Um, but the core of it is sort of like exorcism and madness and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, I mean, again, I think if you've seen In the Mouth of Madness, that would be a very good representation of the kind of thing I'm talking about. Um, if you've seen Jacob's Ladder, that would be another one. Um, and also, I would definitely encourage people uh, that are interested in the game to go check out. And I apologize, my cold is really catching up with me. But go check out the movie or the book; they're both good. The Ninth Configuration by William Peter Blatty. It's an out. I should I should warn you, it's not what you might expect. I think people see the name William Peter Blatty, and they think Exorcist, they think dark horror. Um, but he actually started out writing comedy. He has some movies that came out. He had the book, The Ninth Configuration, I think is actually a redo of an earlier book called Twinkle Twinkle Killer Kane, which I think was even more zany. But I haven't read Twinkle Twinkle Killer Kane, so I'm not 100% sure. But The Ninth Configuration has a lot of just kind of just oddball humor in it. It's a very unusual book and a very unusual movie, but it's ultimately quite serious, which is what I think makes it so interesting. The there's a lot of madness stuff that's played for jokes, but then by the end, it's ultimately about this character who is afraid. He's an astronaut. And he's afraid to go into space because he isn't sure if God exists, and if God doesn't exist, he doesn't want to die alone in space. And I guess they say, I don't know if this is true, he's supposedly the astronaut in The Exorcist, where the little girl comes down and says, "You're going to die up there." It's played by a different actor. It's actually the actor who played what's his name, Abraham, the old man in Walking Dead. That's that actor. He was also in The Exorcist 3, and he does a really good job. It's a really phenomenal movie. It's funny, but it also it just gets at a lot of the themes that I've been interested in the making of this game, and it's impactful. It's got like a real interesting it's a real interesting concept. I'll put it that way, and the ending is very interesting. Yeah, so and again, also Exorcist and Legion. Those are two other things that I would encourage people to check out before they take a look at the game. Or just watch Exorcist and watch Exorcist 3. That's actually one of my favorite horror movies, Exorcist 3. It really holds up. I saw it when I was younger. I used to work in a video store. I used to work in a video store here in like a really small town. We had like a little dinky video store, and so we had a really small horror shelf. And I was in a heavy metal band and into horror, so I made a point of watching all of the movies on the horror shelf while I was there. And so I watched a lot of strange horror movies. Mark of the Devil is one that I remember, being perplexed by. It was very graphic. But Exorcist 3 was one that I saw during that period. And also movies like, I remember The Guardian, which was, I think, a William F. Friedkin movie. I actually liked it. I think it's been panned, but when I was in high school, that was a big hit with me and my friends. But I went through the whole horror shelf, and The Exorcist 3 was one of the big ones I remember. I remember The Exorcist 3 and Serpent in the Rainbow were the two that I'm really liking, from that shelf. There are a number of other movies too, but and those remain influence. Serpent in the Rainbow and Exorcist 3 are really big influences on this movie. And I apologize for the nasally issues going on, but I'm sick. But I wanted to do this late night podcast discussion, and yeah. So I mean, it was just based on this sort of this protracted experience I had, and not only did I not know, like it wasn't that I didn't know. It was I was worried that I might be dead. I don't know how to put it. You have to understand when you have general anesthesia and then they pump you full of like, I don't know what they pump you with, but they pump you with all kinds of painkillers and stuff. It messes with you. I actually ended up not using painkillers after the surgery. When I came home, they gave me a bottle. I took one Percocet that they gave me, and I did not like the way it felt. I had a family member who passed away from something like that kind of an issue, and so I just went without them. And what surprised me was how much the pain, like, I'm not saying pain is always in your head, but how much of the pain that I thought I was having was in my head. It was like the emotions that I was sort of putting on to the cut, which was not, I mean, it was a surgery, but once I was home, it was, it didn't feel that bad. It was more general discomfort than anything else, just from being opened up. But anyways, the point the point was, I was in this really weird state of mind, in part induced from medications they gave me, in part induced from, like, I was having recurring infections. I was getting infections every couple of weeks until they finally put me on antibiotics to stop the infections, and that whole process was like, it had some effect on my mind. Also, the hospital I was going to for my follow-ups was extremely creepy. It was the old Salem Hospital. No, not the old Salem Hospital. The old Lynn Hospital, which you walked in there, and it's just like they had all these pictures from like 100-something years ago, and it just added to the creepiness of it. But the hospitals here are all, they look like the Arkham Asylum. Like if the Danvers State Mental Hospital that I mentioned is like a it's like a neo-Gothic architecture, and Salem Hospital is very similar. Lynn Union Hospital is similar. There's a lot of red brick around here. I think it makes hospitals look very creepy. But yeah, so I was going through all that, and that was, just an attempt to kind of like take those feelings and turn them into horror. But yeah, so anyways, I can tell that I'm starting to diminish, so I'm going to get going. But I just wanted to cover that, and until next time, I will talk to you later.